Hi, I'm Maruwasa, and welcome to Maruwasa on Point. Today I'm going to be talking about foreign direct investment, FDI. Now what that is when external countries or external parties to your own country, state or nation take money from their space, their banks, their reserves or their surplus and inject it into your country with the aim of either building a business or creating something that creates revenue and profit for themselves. Now, in the case of many countries in the sub-Saharan region, FDI has become a magic word. It's all about foreign direct investment. How much money are the Brits going to put into our economy? How much money are the Americans going to put into our economy? How much money are the Chinese going to put into our economy? I say it is important that a country have the macroeconomic stability and conditions and legislative environment that allows other countries to invest in it because it provides a better life for the people of that state as well as greater revenue and a better tax base for the government. But there is a dark side to this because foreign direct investment has become basically the only thing some countries are obsessed about talking about. They only talk about, will we get foreign direct investment? Will Britain give us some money? Will the EU give us some money? Will Switzerland, Luxembourg? They don't ask themselves the question, what of our domestic resources? What of the money within our banks in our own currency, put there by our own citizens? What about the savings of our citizenship or our citizenry? How are our citizens saving money? Are they saving enough money to provide enough money to be available for the investment function of the banking system? They're not asking those questions enough. They're not focusing on asking themselves, how can we take our own internal resources and invest in factories, in businesses that employ our people, one, employ our resources, two, and thirdly, once again back to the people, it employs our unique ideas and intellectual capital. Now, the last one may be a bit tricky. What do I mean by that? Look, the Americans make cars. The British make cars in an absolute comparison world, right? The Japanese make cars. The Chinese make cars. But who makes a better car? They all compete continuously to redefine or to define what a car is and what function it should serve. Consumers reward their answers to that question by purchasing the product. Now, you will notice that the American approach to making cars is not the Japanese approach to making cars, is not the German approach to making cars, because all these groupings answer the question differently based on their education, based on their psychological makeup, based on their national history, and based on their unique frame and understanding of how the world works and what something is and is not. So in other words, the Japanese will not make a car in exactly the same way Americans will make it, nor will the Brits make a car in the way South Africans would make it. In other words, if you move comparative advantage aside, you could argue that Zambians making a car, South Africans making a car, and Angolans making a car of their own indigenous design and indigenous financing would not necessarily result in any situation where their product would not find a market share because it is simply providing the same thing others are producing, because that is not how consumers make decisions. Consumers make decisions in a far more sophisticated way and might make decisions entirely different. Angola might, for instance, use color trim options that people of a certain grouping really enjoy and therefore buy those cars. Same way that some people might have bought Volvos in the 70s and 80s for specific offerings and benefits that American cars did not offer. So there's no reason why Zambians shouldn't be making cars or Zimbabweans should not be making cars. The question rather is, are they willing to stomach the learning curve and the investment to make it happen? Now, what has that got to do with FDI? Well, for instance, if I am Germany and I am dealing with another country, for instance, let's choose another country, the DRC or Rwanda. I am not going to invest in Rwanda to create a competing auto industry. In other words, foreign direct investment, whether controlled by a private entity or by a public entity in the form of a government, will not be used to create entities that compete for supremacy against the very people in making the investment. In other words, people are not going to shoot themselves in the foot by creating an industry that will take away customers from Audi or BMW or Mercedes if I was a German investor on a public level. While on a private level, if I'm a German investor investing in an African country, I will invest to improve cost efficiencies or delivery efficiencies or profit margins on my own product. I'm not going to invest in them being able to develop a product that allows them to compete against my chosen customer to win the business. This is why, for instance, the Chinese are building their own brands using their own internal capital and have created a legislative environment whereby companies are forced to build cars there or to be part of a Chinese concern that builds cars within the Chinese environment, because the Chinese have identified that industry as being strategic and paramount to development. Now let's come back a little bit. What has it got to do with what I'm talking about, the foreign direct investment? What I really would like to get across to most African governments and most business people is that foreign direct investment is not the only source of capital and finance for opportunities in your country. Your rich citizens are a source. Your national savings are a source. Your national pension fund are a source. Your sovereign wealth funds are a source. For instance, during the oil boom times a couple of years ago, now oil has been languishing at a lower level for quite a bit now. But before, Angola, Nigeria, and some other countries were profiting handsomely from the oil business. They used that money to create a domestic reservoir of finance to finance domestic business individuals to build businesses that substitute for imports or create products that are good enough to export to their regional partners or globally. That is the question. So when you hear that foreign direct investment being the only discussion, we should also ask, what role can our own resources, what role can domestic savings, what role can pension funds and the sovereign asset funds play in developing the country? Because when you make the decision only about foreign direct investment, you sit and wait for Britain or China to determine whether your country becomes developed or not, when you could actually be in a situation where you say to yourselves, well, Britain and China are not the only ones with resources. We're going to take our resources from internal sources and invest in possibilities within our country that may not be invested in by external capital because it competes with their pre-existing interests. It is this kind of thinking that allowed Korea to build a steel industry. It is this kind of thinking that allowed Japan to rebuild its automotive industry. And it is this kind of thinking that has allowed China to become one of the world's most powerful economies, if not the most powerful economy in the next few years. It already is the world's second largest and most powerful economy. It is a position that other Asian countries have also created for themselves, namely Japan and South Korea. This is not a unique situation that other countries cannot also emulate for their own populaces or their own countries or their own regions. The difference is how they view the source and the origin of investment. Where does it come from? Ourselves or external to us? Those who understand that it comes from themselves develop. Those that understand that it comes from outside only usually do not develop as well. The best situation is when where you have a government or a people that understand development is a dual space that's based on what investment we take from our own sources and invest in our economy, and that which get from outside and invest in our economy. It is the interaction and it is the tapping of potential of these two sources of capital and of investment that results in a balanced and a productive and a powerful emerging developing country.